Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, we have a really interesting show and lots of things to talk about again. Lots of drama happening now between Benjamin Netanyahu and the deep state in Israel, or what's labeled as the deep state, the Shin Bet. He's now saying that they're trying to blackmail him, but with what exactly? Yesterday, of course, he had this emotional rant, crying, "You made my life hell," and complaining about how he's treated. Now he has this big problem with the Israeli Shin Bet, none other than the Israeli Shin Bet or the Shabak. Why? What happened exactly? We'll talk all about that. And of course, if you're with me for the whole live stream, we'll also be talking about the new proposal from Steve Witkoff, the United States. This Steve Witkoff is like a wizard lately. He's coming up with proposals every Friday and Saturday. But now he's done it on Thursday. So he has a new proposal now. What's the likelihood? What does it include exactly? And is the Palestinian side likely to accept this proposal coming from the wizard, Steve Witkoff? Then we're going to talk about accusations this time, mainstream media, it's as if, they're not seeing the news, of course. Whenever, Israel is outright blamed, with genocide, it's as if no one hears anything, But now the UNHCR is saying outright genocidal acts and sexual assault Israel has been using since the 7th of October. But again, you hardly hear any mention because it's irrelevant, isn't it? Like they were ignoring the genocide case with Israel in the ICJ. It's as if nothing is happening. When you reach a level where you can't hide, there's too much to hide, then you kind of start ignoring. What can you do? Then we will go on to speak about also some other developments, especially with Israeli feedback about the United States position with the Egyptian position, the United States position against Egypt, and them still blocking the planning to continue to cut this aid. And of course, Jimmy, I see you're mentioning that. I will hopefully open the space up if we have time after that. We'll get to the questions in the community. Alongside the response that came from Vladimir Putin with the proposal of the United States again to have a 30-day ceasefire. And what did Putin respond? What did he establish his response on? And what are the next likely steps in Ukraine as well? We'll speak about that briefly in the end. But we will begin with this. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, again, panicking. This time, because of the Israeli Shabak, or the Shin Bet, one of the strongest intelligence/security agencies inside of Israel. They are now outright going out against him, saying that we will release the information. Right? What happened exactly? Well, the previous head of the Shabak, Nadav Argaman, he said that if the prime minister realizes that he is acting against the law, he will reveal information that he has not disclosed to date, and claimed, without democracy, we have nothing to do. And he said, I will reveal this information. If Netanyahu does not adhere to the Israeli law, I will be revealing the information. Then Netanyahu responded, and then, of course, we had comments coming from the serving Shabak head, Ronen Bar, who has lots of feuds with Netanyahu, especially after the case that Ronen Bar started with Netanyahu and the investigation into Netanyahu's aides getting Qatari funding. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu had certain things done against Bar himself as well. He was trying to exclude him from the deal. He was being, very offensive to him and others in the senior security establishment. And then Ronen Bar had it back at him. So he's having a problem with the two heads of the Israeli Shabak, the previous one and the serving one. And then Netanyahu, of course, responded, mafia threats designed to prevent the rehabilitation of the Shin Bet. He's threatening because he wants to have a reform in the Shin Bet. He, of course, wants to dictate everything that wants to happen in the Shin Bet. But with every single reform that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to do, it's something that is in his interest, not in anyone else's interest. He always wants to have these, reforms inside of Israel that, well, do not support the state of Israel in general. This is the argument coming inside of Israel. And many people criticize him for that. Now, Netanyahu himself is saying that this is a dangerous line, and it's a threat to the Israeli democracy. And he's saying never in the entire history of Israel and the history of democracies has the former head of the secret organization carried out live blackmail threats against a sitting prime minister. This crime joins an entire campaign of blackmail with threats through media briefings in recent days conducted by the current head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. So he's using this moment to start attacking the serving one who he has to deal with, by the way. He has to deal with always. Then the Shin Bet said in a response, Shin Bet responded again to Netanyahu. They said this is a serious accusation against the head of a state organization in the state of Israel. Shin Bet head Ronen Bar devotes all his time to security matters, efforts to return the kidnapped and protect democracy. Any other statement on the matter is devoid of any basis. And Argaman himself eventually said, there is no question that the heads of the Shin Bet know a lot. Again, he's trying to tell Netanyahu, warn him again. We know a lot. But we do not walk around with a machete of threats. If we think that the things we know about and that they are endangering the national security of the state of Israel, we will use them according to the law. Now, apparently, the information that these people hold goes beyond current state matters, by the way. So we're not just talking about Benjamin Netanyahu and how he was performing during this genocide and his problems, the criticisms coming against him. These people, especially if you're talking about the previous head of the Israeli Shabak, well, he's been there before. That means he's talking about periods where he was serving rather than the current serving head of the Shabak, because usually the ex-serving head of an organization, Israel, well, they of course have access, they have relationships with the serving ones, and they also give advice in many cases, but they don't necessarily get live information all the time, by the way. I mean, some of them try to, but it's not as if they are the serving head. So he would potentially bring on the table certain things that would harm Benjamin Netanyahu heavily. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu is very angry about this. Benjamin Netanyahu started to panic after this threat from the Shin Bet, and he's, of course, having this counter attack. Then we've had other people criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu. One of them was one of the opposition members, Gantz, who was in the war cabinet before, saying that, he accused Netanyahu, saying that he is harming the state security organizations for political interests. And that attempt is against the security of the state of Israel. And this is what the prime minister is doing tonight. We face enormous challenges. This is yet another part of the war that Israel is having internally. Benjamin Netanyahu, since the beginning of this genocide, he had conflicts with everyone in Israel, including the previous defense minister, the previous IDF chief of staff. He had problems with the head of the Mossad, then the head of the Shabak, then the delegation of the IDF. He has problems with everyone. It shows you the actual approach of Benjamin Netanyahu and his psychopathy. Benjamin Netanyahu is psychopathic, which leads us to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. A lot of talk about, Israel went to Doha. They started to speak about the ceasefire, going into phase 2 of the ceasefire, potentially taking the same amount of time that phase 1 took, which is just over 42 days. Clearly, there are still some disagreements. However, these disagreements could be a coordinated attempt between Israel and the United States administration to again try and extract more from the Palestinian resistance, again at the expense of the Palestinian people. They're banning everything. Bakeries stopped working in Gaza because they lack flour. They're not allowing any aid to go into the Gaza Strip. And it's still the case. And they're trying to extract positions, both the United States administration and Israel, from the Palestinian side, just so that they can get that aid in. So what exactly is that proposal, and is it likely to work? What's going to happen exactly? So there was a report, a couple of reports. One of them was in Axios, saying that the United States gives Israel and Hamas a new proposal to extend the ceasefire deal, saying that Steve Witkoff came out with this proposal, clearly indicating that the talks in Doha that, reportedly began yesterday, failed. They did not work, or at least, both sides did not agree to them. And now Wizard Witkoff came up with another proposal. What is this proposal? He's saying another extension, but this time in return to get the aid into Gaza. See, this is what they do. They start using the aid as a bargaining chip, as a bargaining tool, right? Imagine how evil that is. The people are suffering. No food, no nothing, sky high, everything sky, no medicine, no medicinal equipment, nothing. Healthcare equipment, everything. Let alone the people living in tents and what have you. They're using the misery of the people as a negotiating thing. But what is Witkoff saying? Now he's saying, we will have the phase 2, but listen, we need you to release at least 5 alive prisoners of war, including some bodies, on the first day that this ceasefire agreement takes place, and then 5 more in the end, on the final day. What in essence are they trying to do here? What they're trying to do is basically grab as much as possible on the first day so that they can do whatever they want the next day. That's what they want. And the Palestinian resistance already, they did not appear to be accepting any of this, by the way. And I highly doubt so. Because, we're talking about a phase 2 and the same number of days, but why should they release everyone on that first day, right? We saw how many times Benjamin Netanyahu started to drag and cancel certain things and take a step back, all of that. We've seen that. So why should the Palestinian side accept that when they know that Benjamin Netanyahu has the capacity to backtrack? Israel reportedly accepted what the United States is saying, meaning that they're both trying something evil as usual. But it doesn't look like the Palestinian side, although there is no official confirmation yet, it doesn't look like they accepted it so far. And that was the second thing that I want to talk to you about. Moving on to the next subject. This is very, very interesting. So the Trump administration, we've heard statements. We've heard statements that, are 180, a total opposite to the general statements. And it seems like there's a lot of conflict internally in the Trump administration. So Donald Trump, his administration, initially offered a deputy intel job offer to Daniel Davis. Daniel Davis is a critic of Israel. And Daniel Davis, he also, speaks regularly. I think he has a YouTube channel as well. He criticizes the United States approach of, the war in Ukraine. And he previously said that the United States is misleading the people on the war in Afghanistan. Many things against the official United States narrative. He opposes the U.S. wars as well. And this is him, for those of you who don't know him, that's Daniel Davis. Opposes wars, criticizes Israel, and during many, conversations that he had in the media, he actually said, no, Israel actually is conducting, ethnic cleansing inside of Gaza. So, I mean, this is a part of an interview that I just wanted to share with you guys, with him, just to let you know his views.
Try and kill all of the Hamas people, and you kill tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians in the process. All you're going to be doing is building up more insecurity if you're in the future, because those people will want revenge, etc. Now then, has been playing out so far. So if Netanyahu is not successful at getting all of these Palestinians removed and basically ethnic cleansing, then they're going to be left with, then what do you do? Because the Palestinian people are still in miserable conditions right now. And believe me, the last thing that they are interested in is just having peaceful coexistence inside of a new prison going forward. So there has to be either some kind of political settlement to where the Palestinian people have some kind of hope for freedom, or I'm afraid we're going to stay in this bleak cycle.
So that's Daniel Davis. And of course, the reason that I gave you just this clip is just to let you understand his positions and his views when he talks about Israel and when he talks about Gaza and the conflict in general. And the man, if I'm not mistaken, is a veteran. He served previously in the U.S. Army. He criticized the war in Iraq, and he spoke against the United States intervention in wars across the world. Very critical. And he said that the United States was misleading the world, misleading the American public primarily. Yeah, Jimmy's saying Daniel is a former colonel. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for that. I haven't gotten into his resume, to be fair. I just I was reviewing some of his videos just to kind of understand his position. But I did read out somewhere that he was in Afghanistan at one point, if I'm not mistaken. But thank you for that. And then he also had he speaks more about Ukraine and about Russia, but he also, he voiced his criticism against the war in Gaza and the Israeli genocide and ethnic cleansing, like he said. All of a sudden, he's appointed as the deputy head of the biggest spy agency inside of the United States. Now, before we get into the actual results, which is taking it back, right? They took it back. They decided, no, we're not going to keep him in that position. We have to give it to another person. Why did they appoint him in the first place? This is the biggest question. How can the United States appoint someone in that position in the United States if they are a critic of Israel? That's a very big question. Usually these top senior positions, you have to be, you have to pledge allegiance to Israel. How comes? Clearly, there are people in the administration who do not really see eye to eye with the official-like approach, especially in relation to Israel, and that's why they appointed him. However, then it went through one of the Trump administrators, and all of a sudden, they pulled back on the offer. So we had this report saying that he has been pulled out amid mounting opposition for his criticism to Israel. Now, here they're saying in Politico that the administration not publicly confirmed the decision to appoint Davis, but it was confirmed to Politico by Virginia Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Again, it could be a leak, by the way, to hinder his appointment. Like Israel leaked the information about Adam Bowler meeting with Hamas to try and reach an agreement without Israel before it began to take, before it began to be very productive, to make it fail. So that could be the reason. However, what's for sure is that, well, there's a change. There are certain changes and there are differences inside of the administration of Trump. And that's why sometimes it's a little bit confusing to understand where things are going with them. Even with Trump himself, even when they started to push Israel to, for example, to accept the ceasefire, then all of a sudden Witkoff tells Israel, oh no, the hell that Trump spoke about it includes you. So clearly there are differences. There's an internal battle there in the United States administration, and not everything is clear, especially with the relation to Israel. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So yesterday we spoke about the United States, and the cutting of the aid to Egypt. And if you didn't watch that video, well, of course, you can go ahead and watch it later on. But in short, the United States told the Egyptians officially that that's it, we're going to be cutting the aid from next year, from 2026. Now, that aid is tied with the peace treaty of the Egyptian side with Israel. According to that peace treaty that they have, the Camp David Accords, the United States gives them aid. So if the United States decides to cut the aid, that means it's nullifying the peace treaty. Of course, regardless of the fact that, well, that peace treaty is nothing but ink on paper now because of what Egypt is doing in, Sinai. And before that, the Israeli breach, by the way, I mean, the Camp David Accords, they were established upon, eventually at one point having a Palestinian state, which never happened. So, Egypt always had that argument. Well, the Camp David Accords say that we need to have a Palestinian state. We're not just having a peace treaty with you without the Palestinian. And then Israel doesn't have anything. Egypt could use that at any point. But now, of course, we know what the situation is like in the Sinai Peninsula. And that's problematic for Israel. However, there was this report here following that actual report yesterday that the United States is pulling off or cutting off the aid from Egypt. And of course, this is an Israeli newspaper here, Ma'ariv, and they're also quoting Al Arab Al Jadid as well with their report. I chose this because it has a couple of other bits of information that I wanted to share with you that are essential to understand exactly what's happening. So, according to this report, there's a confirmation that the United States administration, they actually decided to change their official policy in relation to the military aid that they give to Egypt. And then diplomatic sources from Egypt actually revealed to Al Arab Al Jadid saying that, Cairo actually officially received the information from the United States about cutting the aid, and this is due to start taking place next year. However, and of course, Donald Trump, he previously threatened, in case you don't know, to cut the aid of Jordan and Egypt in case they don't accept his plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. But now, of course, he did a 180, which Egypt is happy with. Egypt said, we welcome the change that's coming from Donald Trump. They didn't even question. They didn't take time to capitalize on that statement that was made by Donald Trump, regardless of what he meant by it and regardless of the actual situation, circumstances, because it was just like a blunt response going and stepping in when the question was being addressed to the Irish Prime Minister when he was meeting with him. But what this report also said, by the way, which was very interesting, is that Egypt actually hasn't had an official visit to the United States to even try and change the United States position. So the Egyptians, they're not like going to the US to beg, oh no, please continue to keep the aid as it is, right? The report here says it's actually 2.1 billion that they get, 1.3 billion of which goes to military aid. And diplomatic sources are saying Egypt is not going to the United States to even discuss or ask the United States to review. From their perspective, if you don't want to send that money, don't send the money. Have this unilateral move, well, at least to this moment. And then we will have our own moves. Maybe they will be more liberated, right? Previously, Egypt restricted itself, especially when they wanted to purchase certain things from Russia, for example. The US threatened them with sanctions because, can't bypass us. We have sanctions against Russia. You can't, buy their Su-35s, for example. Then they went to France instead, and now they got the Chinese fighter jets that gave them what they wanted, which are air-to-air capabilities that would be an equation changer with Israel. Because the United States never wanted to equip Egypt, even for the F-16s with air-to-air capabilities, so that they keep the Israeli superiority. And the Egyptians started to get sick of that. But unless, of course, Egypt then, or we have information that then later says, well, Egypt will go at some point to the United States to try and lobby and tell them, look, change your views. We still want that aid. And do you need any assurance? They're not doing that so far. According to this report, no, they're not asking for anything. Until they do that, we understand that the Egyptian position is even getting stronger than before. We have China, we have Russia, we have BRICS, we have other countries too. And more backing now, especially even from EU backing now with their proposal for Gaza that went against the US administration proposal. That was in line with the Israeli proposal. And the final important bit that they mentioned in this report is the worry that's coming from Israel of the level of arms and preparation for war from the Egyptian side. And Yechiel Leiter, who is the Israeli ambassador to the US, has accused Egypt, they're reminding everyone, of a massive, severe breaches of the actual peace treaty between Egypt and Israel after 45 years. And according to him, Egypt built bases, military bases in Sinai that can only be used for offensive measures, for offensive attacks, offensive weapons, attack weapons. This is a blunt and clear violation. He's saying what they're doing in Sinai is not defensive, and they cannot even try and convince us that it's defensive. Which means, of course, well, Egypt so far, they're looking like they're taking a step back from all of this position with the United States. It's as if, they will be liberated. If the United States actually stops this aid, then maybe they have more excuses to do more stuff in Sinai, or even have more deals with other countries too. And of course, Israel is exceptionally worried, which leads us to the United Nations, the Council, United Nations Human Rights Council. They had, of course, severe statements against the state of Israel. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about why they are not being mentioned in, the mainstream media. And what was the Israeli response? So they published this. More than a human can bear. Israel's systematic use of sexual reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence since October 2023. They're saying that the gender-based violence against the Palestinians is part of a broader effort against their right to self-determination. And they're saying that Israel deliberately destroyed sexual reproductive healthcare facilities, according to a new report that they had today. Broad range of violations perpetrated against Palestinian women, men, girls, and boys across the occupied Palestinian territory since October the 7th, 2023, constituting a major element to the ill treatment of the Palestinians and the unlawful occupation and persecution of the Palestinians as a group. The chair of the commission said there is no escape from the conclusion that Israel has employed sexual and gender-based violence against the Palestinians to terrorize them and perpetuate a system of oppression that undermines their right to self-determination. And it didn't just, of course, end there. They spoke a lot about other things too. Their genocidal acts, intentionally attacking and destroying healthcare facilities, targeting the people to a level that can be considered a genocide. And again, you didn't hardly saw anything of that, by the way, on mainstream media. Again, damning indictment. I mean, of course, we knew that, but thankfully now more and more are saying a genocide. I mean, some people, some online figures and journalists and what have you, and presenters were questioning, what's the definition of a genocide? It's as if they've never read the English dictionary. Oh no, genocide, no. ICJ came and said genocide. Oh no, still we don't believe that. Legal law, legal terminology, health, nothing works for them. And now we have this, and what they do, of course, to deny all of that, they just won't publish it. It's simple, we won't say anything, as if nothing happens. But, of course, Israel responded, Israel responded to these accusations. What did they respond with? Well, there were two responses. One of them was from, the official state of Israel, and the other one was from Benjamin Netanyahu. The official state of Israel they were very angry. The official state of Israel said, here we go, blood libel, a sick document that only an anti-Semitic organization could produce. Well, of course, if they weren't going to be anti-Semitic, then who will be anti-Semitic? This is one of the worst cases of blood libel the world has ever seen. And the world has seen many. It blames the victims and crimes committed against them. Hamas is the organization that committed horrific sexual crimes against Israelis. No proof. This is indeed a sick document that only an anti-Semitic organization as the United Nations could have produced. Of course. Well, of course, everyone is anti-Semitic. Everything is anti-Semitic if it criticizes Israel. Every single thing on earth that criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic, including the UN, everything. But also, Benjamin Netanyahu had a response too. Benjamin Netanyahu was same level of fierceness. He said, anti-Israeli circus, anti-Semitic body and supporter of terror. The anti-Israeli circus called the UN's Human Rights Council has long been exposed as an anti-Semitic, rotten, terrorist-supporting and irrelevant body. Woo. It was not for nothing that Israel decided to withdraw from it about a month ago. This is not the Human Rights Council, this is the Blood Rights Council. The UN chooses once again to attack the state of Israel with false accusations, including unfounded accusations of sexual violence. Oh no, we didn't see anything about sexual violence apart from your own rapist going on live television, bragging about it and getting a blessing from your religious figures and the crowd and politicians and journalists. We haven't seen, apart from that, I mean, we hardly saw anything. And no statements, of course, from the Palestinian women who were released from the dungeons of this terror entity. But Netanyahu is saying there's no evidence whatsoever. All right. Moving on to Putin and Ukraine. What are the developments exactly? Okay. So the United States, well, you know, whatever we think about the administration and Trump, they're clearly working towards de-escalation. You know, the way we like it, the way we don't like it. Well, it's happening. I mean, it's happening. There are talks now. And they're not taking an opposing position to a peaceful process. As a matter of fact, the moves that they're conducting are pushing there, but, you know, the Russians still have they still have their own position. What did they propose exactly, and what did the Russians respond? What was the Russian response? So, firstly, all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin, is actually showing himself with, you know, a military gear, right? Here's Vladimir Putin, military gear, right? Walking around. And again, sending a message, well, why is he wearing military gear? But he also had a response. So the United States, they actually had a proposal to the Russians. Let's have a 30-day ceasefire. And then we will look into all of the other details. Steve Witkoff in particular, he had a closed door meeting at the Kremlin on Thursday night. And reports saying he's being careful, to say he broadly supports the initiative, Putin himself, but he's putting some conditions. Well, what did Putin say exactly? He said, we agree with the proposal to stop military actions, but we proceed from the fact that this cessation could be such that it would lead to a long-term peace and eliminate the root causes of the crisis. Now, the roots of the crisis, problems that Russia has to address, confirming that the territories that it controls is theirs, no further argument about them. They don't want this period to be a period where the Ukrainians rearm and all of a sudden they start having more offensives. They want a confirmation, a very clear confirmation of what's happening in Kursk. They're saying over 67,000 Ukrainians died there. And Putin is saying several thousand left. They will either die or be imprisoned. And they better go out. And also another point that came out from Putin is, how will they be used? Of course, he's worried about mobilization, supplying more weapons, or what are they going to do exactly? Second thing as well, he's worried about who's going to actually monitor this ceasefire. They have a 2,000-kilometer border with the Ukrainians. How are we going to actually see who's going to monitor the violations exactly? Is each side going to say, oh no, they violated and I breached and we breached? What's going to happen exactly? And that's insinuating, perhaps, that there might be peacekeeping forces in those areas up until, you know, the initial phase of the ceasefire ends, so that there could be actually a real peace process. And there's also a big gap, and that's another problem, between the American position still and the European position. The European position, or more precisely, NATO members' position, with some others as well, but not all of them. More European countries are showing a problematic approach with the United States administration, saying that you are far away. You know, we're here. If we're not gonna help the Ukrainians now, yeah, well, we're gonna be suffering. And if we're gonna suffer, we're gonna have to deal with it directly. That's why there are calls now from Macron, for example, and others as well, to try and chip in, have a European army, as they're calling it. Clearly, the United States isn't that interested in NATO as they were before, or they're really changing their approach with NATO, and that's raising alarm bells with the European side. So there needs to be consensus, because of course, you know, the US is primarily the party that should primarily have the agreement with Russia, because they were the main backer of Zelensky. However, all of a sudden, them doing a 180 puts Europe in a very awkward position. So if they're not seeing eye to eye, then they might be taking a different position. There might be other European countries saying that, well, we can't be telling our population of people and everyone that, oh, they're hostile, they're going to occupy Europe, and if they win, then it's catastrophic. It's a catastrophic event for Europe as a whole. And then all of a sudden agree to a deal where Russia will win. Russia will be victorious. You know, there is no denying. They will be taking territories from Ukraine for life. That's it. Ukraine officially will be defeated, as in the Ukrainian government, by the way, not necessarily the Ukrainian people. There's a difference between the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian authorities and Zelensky and the people. Because don't forget, in the past years, there were lots of tensions between the population and the authorities, especially with the conscription in Ukraine. They were dragging people off the streets. And reports of over 1 million dead and being dragged into this pointless war that was serving nothing but the military-industrial complex, and greedy politicians who were profiteering out of this war. So the United States, they have to have some sort of an agreement with Europe too. It can't just go ahead like that, because, well, you might have another European country. They already started to, you know, speak with Zelensky and tell him we will help where the United States is not helping and all of that. There would be an agreement. However, what we do understand is that it's on the way. There are positive signs that it's on the way to get resolved. In the meantime, though, Russia is taking an aggressive position. They are actually increasing some of the strikes too. And although Putin is showing positive signs, he put the ball back into the American court to give him the guarantees that he needs to go ahead with the ceasefire that he would eventually want to lead to a full peace process between them and Ukraine. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. I'll open the space up with the time that we have left for the community for a couple of questions maybe. And of course, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them. I'll go back to Jimmy. I remember you were mentioning a couple of things in the beginning. And thank you everyone for, of course, participating in another live stream. And welcome back. 455, thank you for your support. Jimmy, where were you, Jimmy? Jimmy. What did you say in the beginning, Jimmy? Repeat that message. I can't see the actual... you mentioned a couple of things in the beginning. Let's go back from the other chat. Splatted, you're saying, why did China deny selling the fighter jets to Egypt? They're entitled to deny. Why should anyone know? Do their enemies say everything? They don't. No, they keep things hidden. Israel has a secret nuclear project. Why should China confirm that they've been selling it? And they also don't want to raise kind of tensions. You know what I mean? China always tries to play a role where they're viewed as like more diplomatic, non-hostile, although they've made some statements recently saying that they were ready for any war with the United States. But actually, I mean, China is a rational player on the international scene. They're really non-hostile. And they deal with everyone. It's just that this hostility is made by the United States and Western governments against China, by the way. It's not there from China. China is not an enemy to the United States. China is the biggest financial partner, right, of the United States. Both of their trade partner, their trade levels are enormous. Okay, and let's go to the next one. Lynn Zach, thank you so much. And everyone else participating. Tor, Mahmoud, the tide among the Israeli people leaning towards a more humane view of how they can ease the hatred against them, or will there always be anti-human approach? Hope in any election? Well, I think that the global theme is that they are shocked of the level of the hate against them, right? That's at least if we take it from the Israeli mainstream media. They will always talk about, oh, why is, the hate increasing against the state of Israel? Again, to try and brainwash the Israeli public and hide everything from them, because in Israel, you wouldn't see anything about the Palestinian suffering, by the way. There was even a study once. One of the Western actual networks went to Israel to monitor what their news actually bring. And of course, by monitoring, you can see they will show you the destruction in Gaza. They will speak about the numbers, but they don't show the actual misery, so that no one in Israel, God forbid, starts to sympathize with what they're seeing in Gaza, saying that they left it too long. And some people started to see what's happening. With or without that, with people having a humane or a non-humane approach, I think the majority want the continuation of the ceasefire agreement. They don't want a continuation of the war. I think that's very well known by now. The latest stats in Israel, over 70%, they want a continuation of the ceasefire agreement and bring the prisoners of war back and have a deal. Some voices are critical of the human catastrophe in Gaza, but they're very, very small in number. And an election would undoubtedly get Netanyahu out of the way, which would lead to definitely a deal going ahead. Because, any upcoming leader, if they win the elections, assuming they would happen now, by the way, but that's why Netanyahu's trying to delay them, they would build their whole campaign on ending the war and getting the people back, wouldn't they? So they would have to, bring the results very quickly. And then they will say, okay, well, we can deal with Gaza later on. But see, that's the argument, that the people who oppose Netanyahu has. It's like, even if they don't have a problem with the concept of genocide, they'll say, let's get a deal now, and then we'll deal with them, those who, made the 7th of October. But now we have people in Gaza. However, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, he had other plans. He had plans to unite the people around him after there was this massive fracture and split in the society after his judicial reform plans. So he wanted to be the savior that everyone is around. And then he wanted to run away from the court cases. However, unfortunately for him, everything began to chase him even during the war. So the Supreme Court started to say, oh no, we actually need to start investigating him now. He didn't want that. Part of the reason for his war is that he delaying the criminal charges against him. And yesterday we spoke about his breakdown. He didn't want to reach that situation. But he's not going to stay there forever. Look, I think it's really, there's a very high likelihood that this is his final term. He would have been written down as the longest serving prime minister, even more than the founder of the state of Israel, David Ben Gurion, or Gruen, his original name, another one who changed his surname. And that's it. There will be someone new. How will that impact the prospect of a like a long-standing peace? Oh, that's a separate story, because you need core changes. You need core changes to do that, of course. Jimmy, thank you, Jimmy. Said what nations are offering to help Egypt is the US aid. Well, we heard reports that number one, both Qatar and Saudi Arabia offered Egypt some help, and the Chinese are, of course, there, and the Russians are there. But if we want to talk about monetary, not to say that they receive it in a monetary way, by the way, you see the aid that they get, potentially the non-military aid, because you're talking about less than $1 billion. That easy. Qatar or Egypt, Qatar or Saudi Arabia can do that easily. If we're talking about the military aid, though, if they actually cut the whole military, it's not as if they were getting money. They were getting conditional money that doesn't leave the US. So basically buy our products, which is a massive scam. Like, for those of you who don't know, the United States stealing money from the taxpayer and putting it in the pockets of the corporations immediately in the name of foreign aid. Writing, checks. So yeah, they will help. And I think that would actually be good. I think that would be actually good for Egypt. They would be more at liberty. And, they can actually be in a better geopolitical position too. And you also said, my second question is when the deadline up for Israel to allow aid from Yemen. Do you think they will fire to Israel or just boats? There is no deadline. So from Yemen's perspective, they started the operations, which are the embargo in the seas, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Gulf area. So that's happening now. But there was more clarification yesterday from Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansarullah, saying that this is not the roof of the attacks, We can continue. We can actually continue and escalate. And Glenn Hoxley as well, thank you so much. Splat, did you hear about the protest Trump Tower against deportation of Palestinian green card holder? Yes. They were mostly Jewish protesters. Absolutely. Is the tide turning in the US? Absolutely. I mean, of course. I mean, that's why, from the beginning, before of this, people need to understand and differentiate between the Jewish community and the Zionists, by the way. And people need to remember that the majority of the Zionists are not Jewish. Remember that very well. They're in the US and they're not Jewish. They're Christian, by the way. And in the Jewish community, apart from the fact that you already had people who were anti-Zionist before, that growth is only increasing. That growth is only increasing. And unfortunately, some people, they do not know how to differentiate, and they fall into the trap of, starting to go against everything Jewish. And that's a very big problem. And this proves, by the way, media actually ignores that. The media ignores that because the media wants you to believe that all of the Jews are with Israel, right? The mainstream media wants you to believe that every Jewish person is with Israel and every Jewish person is represented by Israel and Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. Not true. Massive lie. As a matter of fact, I would argue now that the majority of the Jewish people are against the state of Israel as it is. Let's be specific, as it is now. I think if they would support a Jewish state or in Israel, it wouldn't be in this form or in the Zionist form, by the way. And of course, yes, not in my name, you know, I've been posting about them from the beginning, really, very vocal, very active. And in many cases, they will make a point, they will go out of their way to, show their Judaism. I mean, which I understand, you know, it's really noble of them to do that because many people deny their existence. And that is very malicious and that is very problematic because those who create the problem, they want the tensions, they want the division. They want the racism, the hatred, and the sectarianism. They want all of that. So long as you hear voices that support that, know exactly who they're serving. If you're seeing people supporting this, overall generalization, for example. And yeah, I mean, they were really big. And I think, the case itself of deporting, land of the free, home of the brave, right? The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, the United States, the Statue of Liberty, deporting people for thinking differently. Wow. It shows you where the United States is and what the United States is about. At least in relation to the administration and the people. OMSI, the Druze made a deal with the HTS, which is bad for those who do want to divide Syria. That's true. But will they be at risk of Julani's death squads? Okay. Of course, I understand your approach by the terminology. I don't necessarily agree with it, but you're right, actually. Many of the Druze community leaders, they made a deal with the new Syrian administration. And actually, the new Syrian administration struck two massive deals in 2 days. And these are very important progresses in Syria that cut the road on anyone who wants to divide Syria. And they are very good. Number one, with the SDF, and then with the Suwaida province in particular. Now, what people need to understand is that the agreement, some people in the Druze community are disputing it, whilst the majority, it appears to be that the majority is accepting it. Those who accepted it are multiple, representatives and religious leaders and leaders of armed movements in the Suwaida province who already confirmed, that's it, we're dealing with the administration, we're one, and we're getting the administration forces in the Suwaida province. One of them was called in Arabic the Rijal al-Karama movement, the men of dignity, and Liwa al-Jabal, the Brigade of the Mountain, and another armed movement. There were reports that the other spiritual leader hadn't really accepted it. His name is Hikmat al-Hajri, who had unclear really positions since the beginning of all of this. But previously he was known to be close to al-Assad, but then apparently he turned against him. So it's still not very clear. So there are certain, issues, but again, it's normal to have these issues. But the main thing is that there is progress for unity. And what people need to know is that after each progress of that unity inside of Syria, there was an immediate Israeli attack. With the declaration, with the SDF, Israel attacked. With the declaration, with the Druze, Israel attacked. And with the declaration of the constitution now, which has a clear separation of powers in Syria, by the way, and urges the president not to interfere in the parliament, Israel attacked Syria again today in an area that they claimed there were PIJ, that it was a PIJ office, right? Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and it was known to be a hub where officials stay in, and Hamas members were there before. And they said that they were smuggling weapons and whatever. Syria denied. There was a denial, or lack of further clarification from Syria. I'm not sure if it's deliberate or not. They don't show their cards. But what we do know is that immediately after that, there was a very, very senior delegation coming from Turkey immediately. The foreign minister, the head of the intelligence, and the defense minister, all at once in Syria. And there are reports that they're going to have a defense pact together. There are reports that in the meantime, they might be equipping Syria with certain things. There were other reports today that, internally in Syria, they're working on a 1,000-kilometer range ballistic missile. And Israel is paranoid, of course. Israel was mourning about the news that they reached a deal with SDF. It was like a catastrophic blow for Israel. And again, I think it requires time, drastic changes all of a sudden. And we pray for what's best, of course, for Syria. We pray for stability and peace and safety for everyone from every community inside of Syria. And they hopefully become a good state for its own citizens, first and foremost, who suffered so much. And then, of course, hopefully play a bigger role. And thank you for that, Omsi. Let's go to your next one. Donna, you asked me twice about Francesca Albanese saying that the invasion of Palestine was either because they thought that they would be safe, or was all planned to steal Palestine. What's your thoughts? I mean, I didn't hear the statement, but what I'm understanding from you, they thought it would be safe there. It was all planned to steal. It was all planned to steal. The notion that we want a place safe for the Jewish people, that's a big lie. The whole idea of a Jewish state is a big lie. They established the whole state on fairy tales. If they were genuine about them establishing a state for religious purposes, then why did the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, who is even disputed not to be a Jew, by the way, and Orthodox Jews in Israel, they call him blasphemous, and they curse Zionism too. Why did he consider Uganda? That's number one. Then, a safe place for the Jewish people. Well, you were already in Palestine and safe before. There was a deal, there was a plan to steal Palestine, a very important geographical location that connects West Asia with North Africa, connects and unites all of the Arab world, and planting a chaotic country over there, constantly wreaking havoc, is a great, to them, a great move to, the enemies of that region and the empire, the big empire. The British Empire did that in multiple parts of the world. The Israel is the creation, the remnants of the British Empire and their deeds across the world. In many cases, they left destruction and division and problems, so that countries can remain, battling each other. And Israel was a perfect fit. They created this ideology of Zionism. And by the way, the creation of the ideology of Zionism came simultaneously with lots of corruption within the Christian and Muslim world too. You started to have more corruption in the people deliberately corrupting things in the Bible, in the Christian world, with more of these movements coming in, and all of a sudden you'll see support of the Zionism, and all of a sudden these are the chosen people. And also in the Muslim world, by the way, too. So that happened in the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. But now, we're over 100 years after that. People are more aware now. The whole intention was to steal, of course, Palestine and create this barrier in the middle of all of the Arab and Muslim world to prevent the revival of that region, really. so that nothing comes out. Because you think to yourself, what's preventing all of the Arab world, for example, from at least an economic free zone, right? And same language, lots of heritage, roots dating back to thousands of years. And I mean, the main intention was to steal. It was nothing. And of course, they came up with all the lies under the sun. They started to create this fictional history and stories and fairy tales, and bring people who start to change their names and killing people, and of course, ethnic cleansing, and now this genocide. And it's doomed to fail. It is absolutely doomed to fail, because fascism proved that it cannot work. Fascism does not work. Building a regime based on supremacy and ethnocracy and racial superiority does not work. And that's what Israel has been founded upon. A nation state for the Jewish people, as they say, regardless of our view on that excuse, right? So yeah, very problematic. And I think it's doomed to fail, like I say, and I believe we're witnessing it too. I believe we're witnessing it sooner or later. Mahmoud, do you say Russia keeping conquered land is equivalent to Israel doing the same? Tommy O. Well, thank you for that. I believe that any aggression is aggression. I believe that any killing of innocent civilians is killing of innocent civilians. And we need to be morally consistent about all of our views about aggression, war, and everything related to that, and the tragedies of that. What I also do think is that we need to also contextualize all of the things we talk about and put everything into perspective. So I can't come and say that the Ukrainian-Russian war is the same as the Israeli-Palestinian war or conflict. They are simply not the same. I would be trying to kind of, simplify or even oversimplify everything, right? Israel, well, they came in a different geographical place after different geopolitical roles, with a previous history of the whole land and the people, right? Palestine was there as it is, whether it's under the Ottoman Empire or before, under the Ottoman Empire, hundreds of years we're talking about. And Ukraine was Russia up until the 90s, right, when the Soviet Union fell. It was under Russian control, or the Soviet Union, the USSR. So we have different histories, the British weren't there, the Ottomans weren't there, they're not Arab, they have a different religion, the culture is different, the reasons that the conflict began are different, their interpretation for beginning or defending or not defending are different. But what I do believe is that in Ukraine, well, there was evidence from people involved, and we published many of that information, that a deal could have been reached, and all of that bloodshed could have been avoided. People very close to Zelensky said that, well, he was willing to accept a deal with Putin, who had his own issues with the expansion of the United States. Because let's not exclude the US and the previous empires from this conflict, right? They have a lot of role. Israel, look who's supporting it. Ukraine, look who's supporting it, right? Ex-neo-colonial, neo-empires. And the United States currently in its form is undeniably a militaristic oligarchy. They told you about the Russians, the oligarchs. They are the militaristic oligarchy. They are the ones who had 100 wars in 100 years. They are the ones who killed tens of millions. They are the ones with thousands of bases across the world. They are the ones with over 750,000 troops spread out across the whole world. That to protect or to bully their way through enforcing their way politically and economically and financially. That's called the militaristic oligarchy. A country based on financial greed imposing its will through violence. That's the United States. And that's where the problems start. They were the ones expanding towards eastwards, towards Russia, despite all of the previous agreements that they had and reassurances that they gave Russia before. And Russia undeniably saw that threat coming to them. Like when you're talking about Ukraine or Kiev or whatever, a couple of 100 kilometers from Moscow. And the United States made it no secret that Russia is the aim. They want a regime change in Russia. This is what we need to understand. They want Russia. That's why they're expanding eastwards. They're using all of this military expansion, profiteering from it, eventually to get to Russia and the Russian gas and the natural resources and having a puppet planted there and what have you. So, yeah, I mean, the concept of aggression, or starting a war, an offensive war, they're usually very similar, but we definitely have to contextualize, and not everything is the same. Like, for example, if we say, there's an apartheid in Israel, it's not like South African apartheid. And the solutions that were done in South Africa wouldn't necessarily work in Palestine, for example, in the same way. Because, the Palestinians are not South Africans, right? And vice versa. So I believe that the main thing should be, of course, is to end all of the wars, essentially, and giving people their rights at the end of the day. People everywhere, they just want to live. It's very simple. But there are certain problems in this world. And one of the main problems is the profiteering of the military-industrial complex and the level of money involved in politics. These two things are very problematic. Combine them together, you have wars when they can be avoided. And thank you, Tommy, for that. And thanks everyone else participating as well. See. If we have, I'll wrap up with mind over matter here. Take the last one. Do you think Russia will say no to the ceasefire? Also, how does the US get to negotiate the ceasefire for a war they started, funded, and lost? Well, that's what they did. I mean, they started, funded, and killed their own people in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden they decided to leave. That's what they do, and that's it. It's no more suitable for us, and we need to withdraw, regardless of the criticism that they got from the armed forces in the United States, who were like, well, what the hell? I've been here for 20 years. I lost my limb or whatever. 20 people commit suicide a day, veterans in the United States, and thousands lost their lives. Families split apart, epidemics in the United States. But they decided to leave, and guess what? They left. And they also left the Taliban to come back. And they left the Taliban some goodies too, that now Donald Trump is asking them to bring back. And the Taliban told them, come back and take them if you can. Come back and get them. Mullah something said. Anyway, so I mean, there is no surprise like of the United States doing that and all of a sudden doing a U-turn, despite the lives lost or whatever. That's how it works, my friend. You elect them. They brainwash you to elect them. You have an elected dictator. You have no say for the rest of the term. Nothing. I mean, democracy, it's a joke, really. So that's not surprising. So we'll start with that from the US. It's not surprising. But if Russia will say no, I think Russia wants a deal, but Russia doesn't want a ceasefire. Russia wants a long-term solution. Russia's already having a problem with so many countries joining the NATO for the past 2 decades, again, against all reassurances given by the United States. And the last thing they want is a ceasefire where the Zelensky regime will get a breather and then start attacking back again, come back with a bigger offensive or something. even with all of this move from Donald Trump with Zelensky. So the Russians, they need assurances. They want to make sure that we are guaranteed those areas of conflict. There were reports that, by the way, Zelensky already accepted, and the populations, especially the Russian majority populations in the eastern part of Ukraine, they made it very clear they've already had problems since 2014 anyway. And guess what? I think eventually we'll get there. Because what's the alternative? World War III, right? And nukes. That's the alternative. And if Donald Trump is indeed interested in ending the wars, despite all of the big talk, then he's gonna have to do that. And judging by what he's done with Zelensky, well, we're heading there. And hopefully we'll see a ceasefire there, or a peace process. And hopefully we'll see an end to the apartheid regime in Palestine too, and have a peaceful solution there as well. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. So thank you so much for everyone who participated. And again, apologies if I didn't reach all of your comments, of course. Thank you to everyone who sent supers, much appreciated. Where are you? Let's see. Chat. 455, Lynn Zach and Glenn Huxley, thank you so much. In the meantime, everyone, I'll hopefully see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Stay blessed, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.